Well, the reason that I'm running, I've become really disaffected with what's happening at the national level in terms of the issue that I care the most about, which is climate change. We haven't seen really any meaningful progress on that issue. And I feel like we need to stand up and do something about it. So obviously, if the federal level is not the place to do it, and at the state level, we see Bismarck's more interested in fighting the culture wars than meeting the material needs of our communities. So with the federal and state level not seeming like the best options, the only option left is the local level. And I think that at the local level, people that stand up, they can make the most impact there. Well, with approval voting, I feel that it's less of a competition and more of a collaboration in the campaign. Instead of it being, one person, one vote for each seat, you see it that you can vote for as many people as you approve of. And to me, that encourages collaboration. So throughout this entire campaign, I've been working with other candidates that are of like mind, that have similar goals that they're trying to achieve. And there's no fear of collaborating with them because there's no opportunity lost in terms of votes you can get together. And in fact, I've door knocked on people's doors and explained this whole situation to them, and they've gotten excited and they said, I disagree with some of the things you're talking about, but it's encouraging to see people in the political space collaborating in such a way, and because of that, you've earned my vote. Yes, I do support adding seats to the commission. You look in, we've got 5 people for a city of over 120,000, and it's only growing, 20% growth in the last decade. I don't see that slowing down. So yes, I believe that we need more people to represent this large and becoming even more diverse community. Well, I think that a study should be done, and we should look at comparatively to other similar sized cities. Off the top of my head, I would feel comfortable definitely going to 7. Perhaps even more is necessary. I haven't exactly done the research to know which would be the right option for us as a city, but certainly adding 2 more seats for sure, and if not more. Yeah, I think that there's something interesting that could be done there. I know that, so we've got 5 people for 120,000 right now. Perhaps you want to say that for every 20,000 people, there's 1 person added, or if you want to keep it odd, every 40,000 people, you add 2 people. I would definitely be interested in exploring that as an option. I don't support cutting the city up into wards for a couple of reasons. The first being that, districts or wards, whatever you want to call them, they're subject to gerrymandering. They're subject to manipulation of the vote, where you see elected officials choosing their electors instead of the people choosing their elected officials. And that's honestly the biggest reason. To me, it becomes disqualifying because there's no need to open the door for such political manipulations. Well, I don't know how else it could be done unless you had some sort of oversight board, which would be that'd be an interesting thing that could be looked at. Perhaps having some sort of city official department that looks into that kind of thing. But I think primarily, I haven't seen a situation where people have been so quote unquote sketchy with disclosing their conflicts of interest. You look at someone like Arlette Preston, and she's very active in disclosing her conflicts of interests from what I've seen. So certainly that could be explored, but I think that I do have faith in our electors to disclose those conflicts of interest. Yeah, I think that the only way you could enforce it is by opening some sort of department in the city. And I wouldn't be opposed to that by any means. I think that oversight is good. The more oversight, the better. And if it takes opening up a department in the city to get that oversight, perhaps that's the best option. I suppose for every situation, it might be best to look at it as an individual situation and not some sort of blanket unilateral thing. But certainly, if someone's voting in their own financial interest, to me, that is disqualifying as an elected official. You shouldn't be using your position as an elected official to enrich yourself. We have that straight in the Constitution, the Emoluments Clause. I mean, it applies only to the president, but I think it should apply to all elected officials. I don't believe you are fit to serve if you're using your seat of power to enrich yourself. Well, I think it's a little too early after the workday, first and foremost. You know, a lot of people get off work at 5 p.m. And so then they're unable to make their way to the commission meeting because they got to get home and get changed out of their working attire. So I think certainly pushing it back to 6 would be a good idea. I think that would be more inclusive to more people. I'm agnostic on the particular day, and I don't have any data that suggests any particular day is better. Monday seems to work for some people anyway. But I think certainly pushing it back to 6 would give the working class more of an opportunity to attend. Yes. Simply, yes. Currently we have term limits, and the way that the commission has set it up right now, we have to vote to reinstate those term limits. I personally always go back to what George Carlin says about term limits. You're basically just reshuffling the deck with, corporate interests. I think with term limits, you'll see that it doesn't necessarily change that. At least this is talking at the sort of federal level and everything. You're still going to see big moneyed interests, spending all the money that they want to get their people elected. And I don't think term limits really fixes that. But on that same note, I'm pretty conservative when it comes to changing that sort of thing. So currently we have term limits in the city. I would say that I would support keeping those current term limits as they are. And one of the things I like about our current term limit system is that it's more like a soft term limit system. If you step away from the venue, you can then come back to it at a certain point. The big thing with term limits is that when you elect somebody that's really fighting for the people, someone like a Bernie Sanders, for example, has been elected for a very long amount of time, they're just as subjugated to term limits as the people that you're trying to term out. So it's a double-edged sword, which is why I just lean on the side of maintaining the status quo in terms of term limits. So that's kind of my thinking on the matter. Well, when I'm elected, I'm certainly going to treat it as a full-time job. And certainly, I wouldn't mind getting paid like it's a full-time job. I think that specifically should be decided by the people and not the commission, because there's a conflict of interest there. Of course, people are going to vote to raise their own pay. But I think that what you see in terms of elected officials' pay, the thing that I always think about is North Carolina, the legislature in North Carolina, where they make like $12,000 a year, like right at the poverty line. And what happens then when you're not paying your elected officials well, you only are opening the door for already wealthy individuals to serve in those seats. So certainly I support the idea. If I was just a citizen, I would support the idea of making these positions full-time, and I would support a pay that reflects it being full-time. But I wouldn't want to unilaterally decide that as an elected official. I think that should be the people's decision. I think that would increase engagement. And so I think that certainly that's a good idea. Because, working people don't have time to engage in their local democracy because they have to work. They have to, get their own paycheck secured before they even have time to think about their neighbors. We don't have time to advocate for our neighbors, and yet some people still stand up and do it anyway. And I think that those people should be compensated. Yeah, I wouldn't oppose that. It's not a cause I would champion personally, but I do think that you look at what's happening in the current race. Someone like a Shannon Roars Jones is dropping a lot of money on TV ads and stuff like that, and it prices people out. When you don't have a spending cap, it prices people out, especially in a city that's growing. There should be no reason that a candidate shouldn't have as much access to the people as any other candidate. And money being that barrier, I don't like that. So if a spending cap is the best way to level the playing field, so to speak, that seems like something that I would be interested in. I would say that first and foremost, it comes from a place of communication and meeting people on the platforms that they're on throughout social media and stuff like that. I know that people have become engaged in my campaign, and they've suddenly become more engaged in the local politics of the community because of that. So I think that, not just going to the meeting and then going home, going to the meeting and then writing a write-up about the meeting and sharing that to your network, asking your network to share that then. I think that engagement comes from a place of interpersonal connection, and we as a community need to be growing those interpersonal connections. I think that's the number one first way that you drive more engagement. I think paying people to be engaged, if they serve, is certainly a way that you can drive engagement as well. But people like feeling engaged, as long as it's not overly technocratic for them. So simplifying what you're doing, not trying to confuse people with what you're doing, trying to be as transparent as possible, and then communicating that message, I think, is the place that you start. Well, I fully support local control. And so whatever it takes to seize that local control, so to speak, I would support doing that. I don't believe that it is wasteful spending to pass a law that contradicts the state level and then take it to court and fight it. I believe that that's important spending because it's asserting our local sovereignty. I know that we're a home rule charter city, and the Century Code says that wherever the charter applies, the bounds of the city, home rule charter supersedes state law. My understanding is that it has to literally be in the home rule charter and not just an ordinance for it to supersede. So I would support changing our home rule charter so that we can assert that local sovereignty, because no one knows best what's happening on the ground in a community than that community itself. Bismarck doesn't know what's happening here. Bismarck doesn't know why we perhaps want to ban plastic bags, for an example. That's another one of those laws that they passed. Local municipalities can't ban plastic bags. I mean, that's ridiculous. If we want to, as a community, stand up and say, hey, plastic bags are a terrible pollutant, we want to do paper bags only, we should have that power. So whether that means passing things into the home rule charter, whether that means passing them as ordinance and then taking the state to a court over that issue, I would support anything that helps us assert our local sovereignty. You can go to Will for Fargo at Twitter or Will for Fargo on Facebook. You can also go to willthompsonfargo.com for my website. But those are the primary places you can find me.